Sure. Here's section 1 of your Infidelity story script, written in a direct, emotionally immersive style with no filler, scene cues, or headings, just a smooth, faceless storytelling flow. The word count meets your minimum 760-word requirement. Greg was always away. Meetings, conferences, business trips, he was constantly in motion, while I stayed still, waiting. Over the years, our conversations had thinned into polite exchanges about bills and schedules. I stopped asking when he'd be home, because the answer never changed. Jason, his son from a previous marriage, had just come back from college. He was older now, more confident than I remembered. He didn't feel like a kid anymore. The house had been tense since his return. Polite, but cold. Familiar, but distant. Greg suggested I take Jason upstate to visit his aunt since he couldn't go himself. It would be good bonding, he said. I didn't argue. Halfway there, the car gave out. Smoke, flashing lights, and a slow coast to the side of the road. I called roadside assistance, and after waiting nearly 2 hours, we were told the car wouldn't be ready until morning. We found a small roadside inn. 1 room. 1 bed. I asked about another option. There wasn't one. Jason offered to sleep on the floor without hesitation. I told him not to be ridiculous, we could share the bed. We weren't strangers. It was quiet once the lights were off. The kind of quiet that makes every breath louder. I lay on my side, facing the wall, trying to ignore how aware I was of him just inches away. My heart shouldn't have been racing. I kept telling myself he was just my stepson. I was just tired. That's all. He broke the silence. Said he'd never really talked to me, not properly. Said he always felt like I was distant, even though I was the only one who ever showed up for him. I didn't expect that. I admitted I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. That sometimes I forgot what it felt like to be heard. His voice was calm, steady, understanding. He told me I deserved more. That I always had. I turned to look at him. He was already looking at me. His eyes didn't move. They weren't full of hesitation or discomfort. Just quiet observation, like he was memorizing something. I should have looked away, but I didn't. My pulse quickened. I reminded myself he was young. Too young. But he wasn't a boy anymore, and we both knew it. There was something unspoken in the air. Neither of us acknowledged it, but it was there. I finally closed my eyes, trying to force sleep. My body was tense. Too aware. Too alert. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke in the early morning hours to the feeling of being watched. I opened my eyes and saw Jason staring at me. He didn't flinch or turn away. Just kept his eyes on mine, steady and unreadable. I whispered, asking if he couldn't sleep. He said he was fine. But his eyes said something else. I turned back over, but I didn't sleep again. I listened to every breath he took, every small shift of weight on the mattress. My thoughts wouldn't stop. I kept replaying the conversation, the look, the quiet understanding between us. There was no obvious line being crossed, but everything about it felt like a prelude. The room was heavy with it. Still, I said nothing. Did nothing. I convinced myself it was harmless. That sharing a bed didn't mean anything. In the morning, I woke before him. He was still asleep, one arm stretched slightly toward where I'd been. I got up quietly, went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. My reflection looked foreign, tired, guilty, and maybe something else I couldn't admit. When I came out, he was sitting up, hair messy, rubbing his eyes. He smiled softly. That same look in his eyes. Familiar, but charged. We didn't talk about the night before. We acted like it hadn't happened. Like the air between us wasn't thicker. But every word after that carried more weight. Every glance lingered. Every silence was louder. We checked out, picked up the car, and continued driving. The ride was filled with small talk and music, but the energy had changed. We both felt it. Neither of us named it, but it was there, undeniable, unspoken, and irreversible. Something had shifted. And we both knew it. Of course. Here's section 2 of your script, continuing directly from the tone and events of section 1. The story progresses with no repetition or filler, maintaining tight, emotionally charged narration. This section meets your requested minimum of 760 words. We didn't speak of what happened at the hotel, but something had settled between us, like heat just under the skin. At first, I told myself it was just tension, maybe nerves. But then he started looking at me differently. Not obvious, but careful. Intentional. When we stopped to stretch our legs by the lake, he offered his hand to help me down a slope. I didn't need the help. I took it anyway. His grip was warm, sure. He didn't let go right away. He made me laugh again. Not out of politeness, but something genuine. That felt rare. I found myself watching him too long. His voice, his smile, the way he looked at me when I wasn't speaking, it all felt sharper now, more alive. He was easier to talk to than Greg had been in years. The ease between us made it harder to deny the pull that kept tightening. I tried to keep it light. He didn't. That evening, we stopped for dinner before heading home. We sat in a booth, just the two of us. He ordered wine, even though he was barely old enough. The waitress didn't question it. I drank slowly. He drank like someone with something to get off his chest. He asked how I met his dad. I told him. Then he asked if I was happy. I said I didn't know anymore. He didn't blink. Said he always wondered why I stayed with a man who never seemed to see me. That shouldn't have hurt, but it did. I told him not everything is that simple. He leaned in, said, some things are. His hand was on the table, inches from mine. When I reached for my glass, our fingers touched. I should have pulled away. I didn't. My hand stayed there a second too long. He noticed. We both did. Back at the hotel, the silence stretched again. Not awkward, just thick with something unspoken. He asked if I wanted to talk. I said no. He didn't push. But the air between us kept pulsing. I stood near the window, arms crossed, trying to will my thoughts into submission. He walked over, slow, unsure at first. Then he stopped behind me. Close. His voice was barely above a whisper when he asked, "Why do you look so sad all the time?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He reached out, gently touched my shoulder. That single touch burned more than it should have. I turned to face him. He looked scared and steady all at once. His eyes searched mine. I said his name, soft, like a warning. He said mine back, like it meant something. Then, without another word, he kissed me. I froze for a second. Just a second. I didn't pull away. My hands found his chest. He was shaking. So was I. The kiss deepened, still slow, still uncertain, but honest. When we finally broke apart, I couldn't breathe. I said this was wrong. He said, but it doesn't feel wrong. And it didn't. That was the worst part. The next few minutes felt like they belonged to someone else. Not me. Not him. Just two people pulled past the point of return. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't planned. It just happened. A moment that existed outside rules, expectations, and guilt. And yet, the guilt still found me when it was over. It sat in my chest like stone. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together who I was now. He reached for me again, tender, not demanding. I moved away. I couldn't let him think this meant forever. I whispered, "We can't do this again." He nodded, but his eyes didn't agree. I turned away from him, curling into myself like a secret. The room was still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the damage hasn't fully registered. My phone buzzed. A message from Greg, "Hope the drive's going okay. Love you." The words cut deep. I didn't reply. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then set it face down. My marriage had already been broken, but now there were pieces I had personally shattered. I couldn't justify it. I didn't want to try. Jason shifted behind me. I felt the weight of his guilt mixing with mine. We didn't say goodnight. There was nothing left to say. What we'd done couldn't be undone. And yet, lying there in the dark, I wasn't sure if I regretted it, or if I simply regretted how much I needed it. Here is section 3 of your infidelity story script, continuing seamlessly from the previous sections. It maintains clarity, emotional sharpness, and depth without repetition or filler, and meets your requested minimum of 760 words, the ride home felt longer than the night we'd spent together. Neither of us brought it up. Jason kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight, both hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing grounding him. I stared out the window, rehearsing what I'd say if he brought it up. He didn't. When we reached the house, we barely spoke. Just went to separate rooms like strangers who hadn't just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Greg was already home. He greeted us with a tired hug and a distracted kiss on my cheek. His suitcase was by the door, half unpacked. He asked about the trip, the breakdown, the hotel. I told him the basics. Nothing more. Jason sat at the kitchen counter, saying little, giving short answers. Greg didn't notice anything off. He never did. The next few days felt surreal. I moved through the motions of being a wife, cooking, smiling, asking how his day was. Every time Greg touched me, I flinched inside. His hands, his voice, his presence reminded me of the vow I had broken. I thought about telling him the truth once. I imagined the words, how they'd land, what he'd say. But I didn't say them. Not because I feared losing him, but because I couldn't explain why it happened without sounding like I had been waiting for it. Jason avoided me at first. Then one afternoon, he caught me alone in the hallway. He asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He didn't believe me. He said he couldn't stop thinking about it, about me. I told him we weren't talking about it anymore. That what happened was a mistake. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "You didn't seem like it was a mistake that night." I didn't answer. I walked away. I caught him watching me more after that. Quiet, guarded looks when no one else was around. He tried to act normal around Greg, but his silence spoke volumes. I felt it too, how close we'd come to destroying everything. At night, I lay next to Greg and counted the lies I now lived inside. Each one heavier than the last. Jason eventually brought a girl home. Her name was Madison. Sweet, young, pretty. I watched him laugh with her in the kitchen, the way he leaned in close, the way she touched his arm like she already felt entitled to him. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. Not jealous. Just painfully aware of how temporary I had been. Later that week, I saw them through the back window, him kissing her the way he'd kissed me. My stomach turned. I told myself this was what I wanted. For him to move on. For this to die quietly between us. But it didn't feel like closure. It felt like erasure. Like I was being replaced before I'd even figured out what I had done. I tried to be better around Greg. I planned dinners. Sat closer on the couch. But nothing changed. He kept checking emails, taking calls, half listening. It wasn't new. I just noticed it more now. Jason had paid attention in a way Greg hadn't in years. That made everything worse. A week passed. Then another. Jason and I barely spoke. He was either out with Madison or locked in his room. I thought that would help me forget. It didn't. One night, I saw him outside by the garage, leaning against the car we had broken down in. I went out without thinking. He looked up when he saw me. We stood there in silence before he said, "Do you regret it?" I wanted to say yes. I should have. But I didn't. I told him it wasn't about regret. It was about reality. That we couldn't undo it, but we also couldn't live inside it. He asked if I ever thought about what it meant. I said I tried not to. He nodded like he understood. Then he walked back inside, leaving me alone with the truth. I've never told Greg. I don't think I ever will. Some secrets rot louder when spoken. Jason and I exist in parallel now, acknowledging nothing, remembering everything. The air between us has cooled, but never cleared. He's moved on, or maybe he's pretending better than I am. Either way, we never went back. We couldn't. I still think about that night sometimes. Not out of longing. Out of disbelief. How something so brief could unearth so much. I don't feel proud of it. I don't feel punished either. I feel changed. Like I crossed into a version of myself I didn't know existed. And once you see her, you can't unsee her. You just live with her. Quietly. Forever. Here is section 4 of your story, continuing the narrative without repeating any prior sections. maintaining the same quality, tone, and focused delivery. The word count meets your minimum 760-word requirement. 3 months passed, and the silence between Jason and me became permanent. We never addressed it again. Not a glance too long, not a slip in tone. Madison became a regular fixture in the house, bright, charming, eager to be liked. Greg adored her. I watched her settle into family dinners and movie nights like she belonged. I said all the right things, asked all the right questions, smiled when I had to. But underneath it all, I was unraveling in slow, quiet motion. I started dreaming of that night again. Not for what happened, but for how I felt, seen, needed, dangerous. I hadn't felt anything close to that before or since. I never imagined my life would divide into two versions, the one everyone saw and the one I could never speak of. That fracture ran deeper than guilt. It rewired how I looked at myself. Jason treated me like I was invisible now. No hostility, no awkwardness, just total distance. And still, there were moments that gave him away. A pause when our hands brushed. A slight change in his voice when he said my name in front of others. I caught those cracks in his composure the same way he caught mine. We were both pretending to be whole. Greg, meanwhile, had become more present. He started leaving his phone in the other room, making an effort. I knew why. Guilt, maybe. Or suspicion he hadn't voiced. He never asked me outright, but there was a shift in how he touched me. Like he was trying to reclaim something he didn't know he'd lost. It only made me feel worse. Because I had already left him in all the ways that mattered. One evening, Greg planned a weekend away. Just the two of us. He said we needed it. I agreed. Not because I wanted it, but because saying no would raise questions. At the cabin, he tried. Candles, wine, soft music. He touched me with hands I used to know. I closed my eyes and let it happen. But the disconnect was louder than anything. I was there, but I wasn't with him. I don't think he noticed. Or maybe he chose not to. Back home, Jason barely looked at me when we returned. Madison was over, as usual. He kissed her while I took my coat off, his hand firm on her lower back, possessive. I watched, then forced myself to walk away. That night, I deleted every message I had ever drafted to him. Every version of the apology I never sent. Every what if I'd written in weak moments. I told myself it was over. I believed it. For a while, then one night, I heard the door open past midnight. Jason had come back alone. No Madison. I stayed in bed, listening. My heart had no reason to race, but it did. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock at my door. Not loud. Not urgent. Just enough to be unmistakable. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After a few seconds, I heard him walk away. The next morning, everything was normal. He made coffee, asked if Greg had left early. I nodded. We didn't mention the knock. We never would. That moment haunted me more than the night in the hotel. Because it meant the boundary we'd drawn wasn't real. It meant we were still circling it, still waiting for the other to blink. That terrified me. I thought of Madison, how she smiled at me with so much trust. I thought of Greg, trying to reach a version of me that didn't exist anymore. I hated myself for all of it. But hate wasn't enough to change anything. I started spending more time away from home. Visiting friends I'd lost touch with, volunteering at the library, pretending to rebuild a life that never really stood. Every hour outside the house felt like a breath I couldn't take inside it. At home, I existed in careful fragments. Enough to appear whole, not enough to feel real. Jason moved out by the end of spring. Said he wanted space. Madison didn't go with him. She stayed behind that night, teary-eyed and quiet. Said she didn't understand. I said nothing. I couldn't comfort her without lying. Jason left without saying goodbye to me. Not a word. Just silence. Like it had all been a temporary fever he was finally cured of. I thought that would bring peace. Instead, it left a vacuum. A blank space where something wild had lived, burned bright, and vanished. Greg noticed the change in me after that. Asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was just tired. That answer satisfied him. It always had.